Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Own Your Greatness. I'm Sienna Krieg. I'm here with Melinda Van Fleet. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching today. Today's topic is going to be all about what makes a great fiction story, so stay tuned for more on that.
Yes. Hi, everyone. And thanks, Sienna, for doing this podcast with me. I know you've been very busy this year so far at school. So, I'm just excited to get going.
Yeah. So I'm gonna base my 3 points on what makes a great fiction story on a book that I had recently read that my Aunt Melinda actually gifted me for my birthday. So it's called The Life Impossible. It's by Matt Haig, I believe that's his name. Um it's a really great story. I don't know if anybody has read The Midnight Library, as it says on there. That is one of his very famous books. It got a lot of attention a couple of years ago, and I really enjoyed that book, so that's why I wanted to read this one. And one of the points that I said from the book that made this such a great fiction story was that it had very, very good character development. We start off with the main character is named Grace, and she is basically depressed. She's living a very hard life mentally. And throughout the story, we get to see her mentality change into something just so beautiful, and you get to see her experience life and love it and learn to accept everything that's going on and see the good in life. And it's just a really beautiful character development throughout the whole book. I really enjoyed that about it.
Wow, that's cool. I have a question after I share about my book. This is very interesting. The book I picked is called The Secretary by Renee Knight. And I found this author because I watched a program on Apple called Disclaimer that was a short series in relation to one of her books. And my husband Ryan and I watched it, and I loved it because it was twisty turvy. And I actually, for the most part, figured out the ending before it was over. So I was like, I don't want to spoil it for anyone out there. So I kind of guessed what was going to happen. And I also guessed intuitively, I don't know how I want to say it, put it all together, something also too about the husband's character. So I was excited that I cracked the code on that show. And so I was like, oh, what else does she have that I can crack the code on? So I'm about halfway done. And I also would agree with character development being a very integral part to a great story. And this author definitely does do an amazing job with character development in this story. There's pretty much just the protagonist and the antagonist. There are some other little side characters, but it's heavily focused. It's written in the first person. It's written in the main character's point of view. So it's heavily focused on that as she shares her journey working for a grocery store chain and the owner of that chain. So it's very interesting. So yeah,
Cool.
would you say that I just want to circle back to that thought I had that your book, because I don't know anything about the book you read, had a lot of like climactic scenes or anything like that, or was it kind of just a steady storytelling book?
I think it was a bit in the middle because there were definitely some parts that just kept going as a story does. And then there were some I don't want to say rare, but smaller moments where there were some climactic parts where you kind of were just like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? Obviously, a page turner. So I would say it's about in the middle.
Okay, yeah, that's interesting. I would say my book, the book I'm reading, is not, in my opinion, very climactic yet. It's just a good story. I can kind of, again, guess what is happening. And maybe because it also kicks off in the beginning with the ending, I don't know if that contributes to a little bit of a spoiler effect. We'll have to see as I continue reading. But I wondered about your book, being that we both chose books this time that are not fantasy or
Hmm.
sci-fi, that they're more just like a good story
Yeah, yeah.
as far as genres. So yeah. I would say too that this book is easy to read. And I don't mean that from like you have to think you're dumb or something like that. It's just
Yeah.
not intense on my brain. So I think there's a lot of books out there in the fiction lane that get a lot of accolades that when you go to read them, they're a little more intense. And this book is one where I don't feel I'm stressed out reading it. I don't have to reread a passage. I could probably read it
Hmm.
on a plane or by a pool. I tend to read on my porch, and it's just a very good read, and again, not stressful. So to me, that makes a good story if it's not
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, what am I reading here? So
Yeah, I actually felt the exact same about the book I read as well. Like it was very easy to read. I finished it pretty fast. I never had to reread a passage, as you said. It was just a very easy and relaxing read, which I enjoyed.
Mhm. Awesome.
Yeah.
And what
Um,
else did you have? Yeah.
the second point that I had kind of relates to character development a little bit. In my creative writing class, we learned a little bit about character development and how readers usually like it because it can be relatable. And that's my second point is that the book has some sort of relatability to other people. And I think that this book, especially with the main character Grace, a lot of people can relate because they struggle with mental health around the world, especially during times like these. Um, People kind of want to read something that they can relate to, and also with seeing like a happy ending, as this book ends happily. So,
Yeah, yeah, no, such a great point. And I would agree with that in terms of this book, The Secretary, because the main character, Christine, is someone who suffers from not being able to set boundaries with her boss and being an overgiver. And, being an overgiver is, definitely something that I can relate to at certain points in my life and with certain people. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. So her tendency to be an overgiver has kind of led into this path of destruction, which ends up putting her in a home. I'm not really sure if it's like a mental home, like to some capacity of like severity, let's say, but she does end up
gotcha.
in a home. So it's very interesting. Her daughter leaves her husband. So, and she's working for a toxic, manipulative, self-absorbed boss. And I was in the corporate world for a long time and I had plenty of those.
Yeah.
So I relate to the story in terms of, the model of the boss and being an overgiver and learning how to set boundaries, and which is always a learning. I don't think anyone becomes like perfect at setting boundaries. I think you're always being challenged with something in some way, shape, or form. So I can relate to a lot of aspects of both the protagonist and the antagonist in terms of that. And then as a subtext, the company that the secretary works for is a large grocery store chain, and my background is retail. So I'm also like, ooh, it's also like in my setting, in my world a little bit. So that was just kind of like an extra little bonus. And I think people tend to look for ways that characters or worlds or settings are relatable to what they're going through or what they've been through, and just make the story more enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And then the third point that I had was, and if you guys want to go back to our video about cliches, this kind of relates to that again as well, is that the book had a sort of uniqueness to it. I've never really read anything like this before. I mean, I usually read fantasy as we review over this channel, but I've read a couple of books somewhat similar to this, but they weren't like exactly the same or anything like that. This book definitely had some different elements to it. For example, I really liked that this book, how it was formatted, I guess. The book was basically like it started off with Grace's, who I said was the main characters. She used to be a teacher, and it was her old student emailing her back about like their life or something that was going on in their life, and they were like, "Can you help me?" And then the rest of the book is kind of her story and how she got over her mental illnesses and her issues within her life. So I thought that was really cool how it was like an email response almost. It was just very clever.
Oh, that's cool. So the story is that she's then helping this other person with their challenges, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's really amazing. I love that. That's
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's funny, I had put as the third one. So this is funny how these are lining up, and we didn't prep any of this,
No.
everyone out there. Like,
Mm-mm.
like we didn't prep any of this. This is cold. Like we knew the topic and general direction. I knew what book Sienna was going to talk about. But that's it. But I put as my third point, that's why I had to look at my cards that I wrote, is interesting and intriguing. So, and you've used that word intriguing before in our podcast. I think that's such a
Mm.
great word. So I'm adopting it too. Thank you.
Yay.
But yeah, so even though, like I asked before, this isn't like a super climactic book, I've kind of figured it out a little bit along the way. I'm still like intrigued. I'm still interested. And I think that really goes to this, sorry, it's my ice machine. That kind of goes to the like the skill of the writer. I mean, really, I have the chills. Like that's the skill of the writer, right? That you can take something and you don't have to have like a bloodbath every 5 seconds to create interest and climax and all of that.
Hmm.
Like it can still be an intriguing read where you want to keep going. I've returned so many books to the library like early where I've been like, oh, yeah, return. And this one's a
Yeah.
library book. And I just got the notification that it's due next week. So I better finish reading
Oh
it.
my God.
But I want to finish reading it, right? So yeah, I think that is such a good it sounds so cliche, right?
Yeah.
To
Hmm.
say that, but it's just true. It's literally just true. And
Yeah.
so if you can, sharpen your writing skills to where your pacing is really good, your character development, it's not too confusing or overwhelming. It has some type of interest that's relatable to, whoever you're trying to reach or the vast majority, however you want to put it. I think that will increase the opportunity for more people to read it, want to read it, and that people will continue to read it and not just
Yeah.
return after the first chapter.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So yeah.
I would like it's just, and I know this is used so often, but like thinking outside the box. Again, like what this author did with the email response, basically. Like I would have never thought of that. I just think that's such a clever thing to use in your writing. So just like you said, not making it too confusing or too intense where the reader's like, what's going on? Like I can't understand this, and I'll have to reread it multiple times, but something unique and different that's not like whoa, but it's
Mhm.
still intriguing and it draws you in.
Yeah. And I have a question for you too. What are the names of the characters in the book? Like their
The
names?
the main character, her name is Grace Winters. Um, the person who's emailing her, I don't even remember if their name was mentioned. There's only
Mm, okay.
about three main characters in this book. One of them's Alberto. That's like the second main character, I would say, and then his daughter, but I can't remember her name. But those were honestly
Yeah.
the main characters. There was not a lot.
Yeah.
not
I
too
just
many
find,
characters.
yeah, no, that's cool. And that's all I was curious about because the characters in my book are Christine, Mina, Dave, there's like I think a Rachel, so it's and then it's like really
Mhm.
sub, characters, a Margaret, a Sarah, so where I'm going with this is I feeling like so many authors, especially in the fantasy lane, especially, are just overcomplicating the names. And they're
Yeah,
just
there's some of them are the most random names. I'm like, what is this?
really? Like, come on. So it's just more enjoyable if like I can kind of understand the name,
Yeah,
you know? Like, do you need it to be some crazy name that no one can, like remember? It just makes your brain like scramble. Like I
yeah.
want to just be like, yeah, Christine. I know the names I've picked
Hmm.
out for my book, and I had heard this little tip I'll share if anyone's writing. I thought this was a great tip, and this is a tip that I'm using for my book series, is just make the names of the characters a different first letter. So if people like, attach, the character name with the character, like the first letter will be the main thing. But then in general, I'm
Hmm.
not making them like overcomplicated. Like
Right.
I want you to be able to pronounce the name and not have like
Yeah.
brain scramble as you're trying to read it. Pay
It's-
attention to the story. So
yeah.
so yeah, so I was just curious because I like really enjoyed that I can read and say Christine and Hina and like just kind of keep on like going with a
Right.
conscious flow.
Yeah,
So
no, I'm glad you brought that up because that is a really good point. Like through
mhm.
the books that we've read, through the other podcasts that we've done, like I think I've like tried to pronounce some of their names and I'm like, I don't know how to pronounce it. Like like what are
We're like
these names?
I think we mentioned this on a podcast before too. Like then I would, feel bad. And then I'd hear someone else like on an interview going, yeah, how did you say that? And then the author would, say it. So I'm like, oh God, it's not just me.
Yeah, it's not just you.
It's not just me. Let's like eliminate that mind loop there. It's not just me.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I really like this book so far. So I'll be curious to kind of see if it gets more twisty in between where I'm at, which is literally the middle to the end, which like I said, I know basically how it ends. We'll see if there's like a big twist. If there's
Mm-hmm.
not like a big, shocking twist, like a midpoint turn or something, I'll still say it was a good book and an enjoyable
Yeah.
read and recommend it, especially if you're going on vacation or, want something to pick up. So
Yeah,
yeah,
absolutely.
cool. Well, that's all I have. Do you have anything else?
That's all I had as well. We spoke about everything that was on my mind about that. So,
That's so cool. And tell everyone where you're at.
oh yes. So as you can tell, I'm not in my usual spot. I feel like I've changed the spots actually a lot. But I'm not in my house. I'm at DePaul right now in the podcast room. So I feel very fancy right now.
You are so fancy. I love it.
I had to reserve it and everything. So very
I think
special.
that's so cool when you told me that. And tell the viewers this too, because this is big. I'll phrase it this way and you can correct me. How did you be able to get access to the podcast room? What are you part of?
Oh, so I'm a part of a program called Media Fellows, which is a thing at my school. There's a lot of fellows programs, but Media Fellows is specifically where we have two classes our first year learning all about media. So we get to work with the TV station here, the radio station, the newspaper, podcast room, obviously. And then we eventually, around our third year, we will get an internship with some media program in the US and get to work there and get some experience. So it's a really cool fellows program. I love it very much.
That's awesome. And you have a very famous alum there. So I put it out there to the universe that you can intern with him.
Yeah, we have some good alum.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And then because we're on this topic, what did you start last Saturday night?
Oh yes, I just started with my friend Kat and Alana, my friends Kat and Alana. We are now doing a radio shift every Saturday from 6 to 7 on WGRE 91.5 radio. So everybody tune in if you can. It's been fun, it's exciting. We're just kind of learning the ropes. So we were learning the ropes last time, so we'll be a little more relaxed this next shift that we have. So
Mm. Yeah, it's so cool. I know your uncle and I listened. I know your mom listened, probably Jake, I would assume, your grandpa and
mhm.
Marianne. So we'll just spread the word. I'll put the link for everyone out there if you want to listen to Sienna on the radio. They played some really good tunes. So, and then I
Yeah,
listened to the DJ after DJ Be More Kind. So giving her a shout out too. So yeah,
yeah,
you and
she's
Alana
great. She's
did a
great.
great job. So yeah, it's really cool.
Thank
And then
you.
you're still writing with the paper. So a lot going on in
Yep.
Sienna's world. If you've been
Lots of
just kind
media
of like,
things.
yeah, if you just kind of like know me, that's why you're here. Like definitely follow Sienna. She has articles and blogs on Medium. She's on Facebook. And I just appreciate everyone watching this podcast. If you're new to finding us, we definitely have a lot of podcasts out there, so you can fill your boots and give us a shout out in the comments.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for saying that, letting me shout out my radio shift and all that. I appreciate
Awesome. I
that.
don't remember. I went to Purdue and I was telling your grandpa, like, I don't remember having a radio station. I mean, this was a
Hmm.
long time ago, people. Still radio's been around longer than me. So it's yeah, so I think that that's really neat. And your grandpa doesn't remember that from when he went to college either. So that's like really neat that you have that opportunity.
Yeah, I'm very grateful for it. It's very cool.
Hmm. Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in and liking and subscribing and checking out our other videos. And probably aim to do this like at least once a month. It just depends on our schedule and how fast we can read.
Sounds good. Thank you guys, everybody,
Especially
for
me.
watching. Really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you, Sienna. I love you so much.
Thank you. Love you.